Welcome to the Tim Castle Show, where I talk to courageous individuals doing inspirational things around the world. On the show today, I've got a real treat for you. I've got a negotiator, Keld Jensen, author of 27 books. He's sold over 3 million copies, and that's because negotiation is such a critical skill in today's day and age. Now, he's got a new book out called The SMART Negotiator, and that's all about the fusion of AI and negotiation. In this episode, I dive deep into the strategies and techniques that we can use to create more value and to go down a different path. Now, how do you become a hybrid negotiator, someone that brings in the power of AI and the human skills that make deals that matter? This is what we dive into in this topic, and it was such a fantastic conversation. He is a trainer across the globe. Over the last few months, I've seen him go from America to Europe, and now he's in Australia, teaching corporate clients how to negotiate, how to influence, and how to master AI with all that's going on. And I'd say we are in a tipping point here. There is a lot of change happening. It's rapid, and the velocity of that change is coming at us every single day. If you want to get ahead, grab a copy of The SMART Negotiator, check out the episode, and get stuck in. Start playing with AI. Start understanding how you can use it to leverage your negotiation strategies. Get a negotiation strategy. There are plenty of questions in this episode that are worth pondering on and putting into action. So without further ado, take it away, Keld. Okay, today on the show, we've got negotiation powerhouse, someone who's charging the way forward about how the world thinks about influence, trust, and deal making. He's advised governments, Fortune 500 clients and companies, global brands like Lego, Johnson & Johnson. He's the mind behind the award-winning Smartership model and a best-selling author of 27 books, I believe. Global thought leader when it comes to negotiation, strategy, and behavioral economics. His new book, The SMART Negotiator, dives deep into the future of negotiation, where trust, transparency, and AI bring how we win future deals forward. And this isn't just theory. Kell brings over 30 years of experience in high-stakes negotiations and deal making. I'm excited to dig into the psychology, the tactics, and the breakthroughs in his latest work. Please welcome to the show, Keld Jensen.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
I am delighted to have you. I'm so excited. And I'm glad you could join to discuss what I believe is the future of negotiation and how to leverage AI in negotiations and create more value. So I think that's what we want, right? We all want to become effective deal makers. And yet, as we were discussing before the show started, I think the majority end up just trying to wing it when the really big negotiations come through. And what's been going on in the world with this exponential change that's been happening and the velocity of AI, like what's been the biggest surprise that you've seen with this shift happening?
Well, right now, to be honest, Tim, I think the biggest surprise to me is how many professional negotiators who have not yet embraced the idea of AI. You know, I did a keynote recently that I think there was about 600 people in the room, and I asked them, how many of you are professionally using AI, not just for fun at home, for recipes or what have you, but actually using it professionally in negotiation? I counted 4 hands going up. And that's not unusual when I'm doing keynotes or workshops. It's majority of people have not yet professionally really start using AI. They all, been playing around with it. They all been trying it out. They all been doing something. But most organizations don't have a strategy. They don't have an approach. They don't have checklists. They haven't been thinking about how should we use AI. And that's a surprise to me because honestly, Tim, I think AI to negotiation is really the same as when electricity was invented. It's a major step for all of us. I have to say one thing though, it's kind of a warning because I have lots of people coming to me saying, "So that's cool. It's kind of a shortcut. I don't need to be educated in negotiation now because we have AI." That's a misunderstanding. You still need to be educated. You still need to have experience. You still need to know what you're doing. Otherwise, I would compare it to you and I jumping into an F1 Formula car and we don't even have a driver's license. I mean, we would crash and burn in the first corner, right? Because we would have no idea what we're doing. And the same thing happens in negotiation. You still need to be skilled. You still need to know what's happening. Otherwise, you can't interpret what AI is doing for you. And you might wanna get that knowledge before you step into that Formula car, how it's actually working. So one thing, the big surprise to me is, as you're asking, is really how few people that already have gone into AI. And my second surprise is that people think it's a shortcut to avoid actually studying negotiation. And both of that is kind of dangerous, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. If they're hacking their way through it and avoiding doing the work. So where are people going wrong then when they're is it just that they think about it as a shortcut, or they think that they've upskilled in AI and then they're just applying whatever the AI says, or is it their questioning style, their prompting style? Like, where would you
Mm.
point them?
Well, let's take a step back, just like we talked about before we started the show, Tim. I think a lot of people, I don't want to offend anybody, but I think a lot of people are unconsciously incompetent in the science of negotiation. I actually think a lot of people, now obviously, I meet a lot of great negotiators. Let me just point that out before anything else. But I think a lot of people actually don't know what they don't know. They're not really aware of what they need to do. There was an interesting study in the US released recently that 55% of professional legal professionals have never ever received any formal training in negotiation. And to be honest, and I apologize for my language, but that scared the crap out of me that you have that many people involved in negotiation every single day and have never received any formal training. Because it's not something that you do automatically. There's always this debate in the world of negotiation. Is it art or science? I think it's
Mm.
both.
Okay.
But if it was just purely art, you could be born into being a great negotiator. I don't think that ever happened. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good negotiator today, but when I started out, I was horrible. I had no idea what to do. And I started my career originally in the tech industry and ended up being a CEO in a public company in Stockholm. And I thought at that point I was a great negotiator because I made it in the business world. I've done really well. And then I met a really cool negotiator who became my mentor. And in 2 hours, he made me realize that I was unconsciously incompetent because, as I said earlier, I had no idea what I was doing. I was doing something every day, but I was doing it wrong. And sometimes, Tim, it's kind of funny. People come to me and say, I don't know if you can teach me anything because I have 23 years of experience in negotiation. And that's probably true. But what I sometimes find is that it's not actually 23 years of experience, it's 1 year of experience that repeated 23 times, right? That's not really developing. So I think one of the challenges is that we have to acknowledge that, and I'm not just saying it because I'm in the business, but we have to acknowledge how important negotiation is for success in life. And I often talk about that when I work with clients and individuals and governments around the world, I'm actually not talking negotiation, I'm talking success. Because why are two commercial organizations negotiating? There's only one reason. They do it to create and distribute value. I'm happy to repeat that. They do it to create and distribute value. That's the only reason two commercial organizations have ever been sitting down to negotiate. And in order to understand that, we also need to understand that we need the toolbox, we need the education, we need the background to do that properly. And I think one of the worst nightmare, you probably experienced the same, Tim. One of the worst nightmare is meeting a counterpart who are unskilled, uneducated, and haven't got an idea on how to negotiate. I don't know. Do you play tennis, Tim?
I do. My son also.
All right. Well, okay, good. Because I'm not very good at it, but I play tennis. And you know what the worst thing is I sometimes experience is that when I'm playing tennis with somebody who's worse at it than I am, I'm sometimes losing to somebody who's not doing as well as I am, simply because I get frustrated that they don't know how to play the game. But on the other hand, when I'm playing with somebody who's better than me, and that happens most of the time, I'm enjoying the game. I'm almost
Mm.
standing there applauding, thinking, it is so cool. It's like a ballet because you do it so beautifully. And
Mm.
the same thing happened in the world of negotiation. When you meet somebody who haven't got a clue on what they're doing, it's horrible. And unfortunately, there's a lot of negotiators out there negotiating for millions of dollars that really don't know what they're doing. And to me, that's scary every single day that organizations are sending people out that don't know what they're doing.
I think that's a really important point you made. And when you started this conversation, you talked around an organization not having maybe a negotiation strategy, or just even
Mm,
thinking through how are we going to negotiate and then negotiate
mm,
the negotiation. So it's
mm,
like you say, you're frustrated because you're dealing with someone that doesn't even understand what the game, yet they're on the board.
mm.
And so
Sure.
Okay, so if we understand that the true essence of negotiation is value creation, and we've got that locked
Mm,
in, like, is there like a fundamentals of negotiation or the component parts that we should be thinking about just to give someone the
mm.
building blocks?
Sure. I normally talk about four things that is evident to be more successful in negotiation, and it's based on a study we did on 35,000 negotiations since 1998. And one of them is basically what you said already, Tim. We need to have a negotiation strategy. And I like to tease people. So, when I step into a new client, a new organization, I often start asking them, could I please see your official negotiation strategy? And most organizations are very quiet then. And then a lot of them goes, because they don't have one. They have a communication strategy, they have a go-to-market strategy, they have a research and development strategy, they have a budget for the next 12 months, they have a lot of stuff, but they don't have a negotiation strategy. And I'm sure we don't have time on this show to talk about it in detail, but I can just say very briefly, we need to have a negotiation strategy in our organization. Second thing I discovered is trust. And I actually did my doctorate on trust in negotiation combined with AI. And one of the things I wanted to research and try to prove is that trust is a monetary value. I think we can all agree trust is a nice thing to have. But I wanted to take it a step further and prove that trust is not just a nice thing to have, it's actually a commodity. We can measure the value of trust. And I succeeded doing that. So we actually found that in high trust negotiation, where people really trust each other, they managed to create up to 34% more value than in negotiation where trust is very low. So to me, and that was kind of my ambition from the beginning, is to prove that trust is something that create value. And think about it this way. When you have a high level of trust in any kind of negotiation, the transaction cost goes down and profit goes up. But on the other hand, if trust is low, transaction cost will go up and profit will decline. And unfortunately, Tim, trust has basically been declining in the Western world in the last 20 to 30 years. So we have less trust today than we did 30 years ago, which is a challenge because obviously that just decline and reduces the opportunity to be more profitable. So I call that trust currency. I just merged the two words, trust and currency, because it's a monetary value. So that was the second one. The third one is what I call role of engagement, because and I know this sounds weird to a lot of people, but we have to negotiate on how to negotiate before we start negotiating. And think about it this way. You may perceive negotiation like playing chess. I may perceive negotiation like playing tennis. So if you and I meet up, then we start playing two different games, right? It's going to look awkward and ridiculous. You're sitting there moving the chess pieces around, and I'm throwing my racket around in the air. And that's how a lot of people negotiate. And I'm not blaming anybody because we just perceive negotiation differently. So we have to agree, Tim, are we playing chess, poker, tennis? What game are we playing before we get started? And the fourth and the final one, and then I'll stop talking, is the concept of negoeconomics, which is just short for negotiation economics.
Mm.
And that's an award-winning mathematical model I created that document that up to 42% of the values in a negotiation often disappears. And it's not rocket science, it's very simple, really, because it's the asymmetric value between you and I. So what is your difference in cost of capital, delivery time, warranty, installation, warehousing, what have you? And the one that carries the lowest cost should obviously take on the burden, and we share the difference between the two of us. And what is wonderful, if I just to connect all this to AI, is that AI is the perfect tool to help us address a lot of these issues. So the four things I just mentioned that clearly shows the organizations that are more successful than others, AI can support us on all four of them very efficiently.
This is awesome. I mean, there's so many bits there that I could dive into, and I love the trust building piece because I do think, yes, you're right. We are in a trust deficit here, and it has been declining, and that is almost like your single biggest opportunity or competitive advantage right now. If you were to double down on just understanding the fundamentals of that and combine that with what you're teaching, which is get a negotiation strategy. Just thinking about, like, I just obviously knowing, working in sales, working with big organizations, like how much money they invest in a go-to-market strategy. Yet, to
Mm,
your point, if we had trust as a component, we could add
mm,
34% growth to every deal. That's the year
mm,
done. If we were getting
mm,
year on year compounding 34% growth, plus what you talked about in Nego economics, getting
mm,
42% value, like there's just so much
mm,
value on the table that people don't realize is
mm.
there. But
Yeah, yeah.
to kind of push this in a new direction. So there's four pillars, and AI has now come along. Like, where does the
Mm.
human, like, what should someone be doing if they were to leverage those four pillars combined with AI right now?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Tim. I would say first and foremost, before doing anything else, again, we have to take a step back and then figure out how do we as an organization want to negotiate. Um, and when we talk the world of negotiation, as we know, we typically divide it into positional negotiations, zero sum, I win at your expense or you win at my expense, or collaborative negotiations where we try and work together and create the value. Um, so what I'm talking about generally is creating a matrix that basically defines how do we want to negotiate with our counterpart. So if you look at a matrix where we have a vertical and a horizontal line, the horizontal line shows how important the counterpart is to us, and the vertical line shows how important we are to the counterpart. Obviously, if you're going to negotiate with a counterpart, let's assume that you and I are negotiating, Tim, and I value you very important, and you value me very important as well. Obviously, we go to the top right corner on this matrix, right? So if both of us consider each other very important, it's obvious we have to go into a very collaborative negotiation. Not doing that would be utterly stupid and unintelligent. On the other hand, if we are in a commodity market, you're not really important to me because there's thousands of customers out there. The same thing goes the opposite way around, so you're not important to me, I'm not important to you. So we are in the bottom left corner. Then obviously, why would we waste time going into collaboration when it's a commodity? We might want to use purposely positional negotiation. So I'm not the one preaching that we should always do collaborative negotiation, but what I often see, Tim, is that negotiators accidentally stumble into a conference room, and then they accidentally end up in a strategy of positional or more collaborative negotiation. Not a purpose choice, it just happens based on the mood or the counterpart's reaction, or did they get a fine on the freeway on the way to the meeting, or what have you. So before we do anything else, you as an organization have to define how do we want to negotiate. The second thing you have to do before doing anything else is actually looking at your variables. Let me explain. A variable is anything that is negotiable in your organizations. That could be delivery time, warranty, installation, efficiency level, what have you. What I often find, Tim, is that most organizations are negotiating on too few variables. It's the usual suspect that they are negotiating on: the price, delivery time, what have you. And I can see throughout all my work with clients worldwide that a lot of the value lies outside that typical list of the usual variables that they are negotiating on. So the thing you have to do is actually being creative and develop that list of variables, and might even want to develop that with your counterpart before you do anything else. And then you have to quantify the variable. So you need to know the cost and the benefit of one. Let me give you a quick example. I was sitting with a procurement officer the other week, and he said to me, I'm thinking about demanding from our suppliers that we should expand the line of credit from 30 days to 90 days. And I said, well, that might be a good idea. What's the value to you if you do that? And he said, I don't know. And I said, are you stupid or what? Because, when you go out there and demand a longer line of credit and you don't even know your benefit, you might put a cost to the supplier that is way bigger than your benefit. And that is not serving anybody. So what you need to do before you make a decision that you want to demand an extension on credit line, you have to figure out what is your cost of capital. Because if your cost of capital is 6%, but the supplier's cost of capital is higher than that, it doesn't really make sense, because you put a higher cost on their expenses than the benefit you have. And it sounds really simple, Tim, but you wouldn't believe how many major organizations in the world that is not thinking this through. They're just putting a demand on the table, don't even know what the consequence is for themselves or the counterpart. And again, this is another example where AI can actually help us, because AI can be the critical counterpart or coach that could actually ask that question. So when you go to ChatGPT or whatever tool you want to use and dot in, I want to expand that, could you list the critical items that I have to be aware of before I do that? AI will definitely coming back and say, have you been thinking about your cost of capital compared to the counterpart's cost of capital? So anyway.
But this is great, because it's all about creativity and getting you aligned into understanding just how much value creation possibilities out there. I do like that example. I was lucky enough to see your book, The SMART Negotiator. I know it's coming out in September, and I think people should just get out there and get a pre-ordered copy so that they don't miss that. But yeah, I even used that today, right? Thinking about the cost of capital, because you are putting unnecessary stress on your suppliers. At what risk? And you can almost lower your prices and still get the deal done and still be better off than if you made them go get a loan from someone to then pay, because you're damaging business without realizing it. And there's just so many ways, if you understand how to communicate that you can figure out that value that works for both.
I can share a very concrete example from one of our clients I have been allowed to share, ConocoPhillips. They have a unit up in Alaska that is doing drilling and what have you, and they're working with a lot of local suppliers. And it's kind of a stupid question. Who do you think have the lowest cost of capital? A public company like ConocoPhillips or a smaller local supplier in Alaska? Well, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? ConocoPhillips obviously have a lower cost of capital. Now, ConocoPhillips have previously done what most major organizations have been doing. They have been exhausting the supplier's ability to make money by just going out there and demanding longer and longer lines of credit. But they attended one of our workshops and came out and was thinking, I think we're doing this wrong. So they actually went out to the main sub-suppliers and said, you know what, what's your cost of capital? And figured out that some of them were very stressed on cash. So they said, why don't we help you out with the cash? So we will pay in cash when you deliver or even upfront. And just on one variable, changing terms of payment with one supplier, ConocoPhillips profited $400,000 on just one variable. And this is money that was capitalized just through the asymmetric value. So the important key thing here, Tim, is that the supplier didn't pay for those 400,000, but ConocoPhillips just created that by helping the supplier. And talking about trust and relationship, don't you think that the supplier is more loyal to a company that helps them out instead of somebody going out there saying, Tim, now we want 120 days line of credit? It makes sense.
It totally does. But I completely hear what you're saying about the CEOs or the C-suite out there that will be doing these deals for tens of millions of dollars, big deals, and they think, well, this is just a very small variable, or this is a very small point. It's not that big a deal. It's 400,000. I'm doing a deal for 20 million. Like, I get it.
Exactly.
And the point
Yeah.
I think you're making, which you make very, very well, and obviously in your experience as a negotiator, is that this all adds up. There's not just one variable, there's multiple variables. And once you start being able to be creative and understand how to deal with one and build the trust, you can knock the next one down and the next one down and the next one. Suddenly that adds up to a big number. How do we then enhance our trust building using AI? Like, how should we leverage AI to build that trust?
That's a wonderful question, Tim. And you know what? In the beginning, when I started looking into AI back in 2019, I thought the same as most people, that AI would probably stand in the way of trust between human beings. But I had to change my mind because we did a study last year with World Commerce and Contracting, a big nonprofit organization with 80,000 members. And what we did was we created a simulation. And then we ran three different comparisons. We had one negotiation where two teams of two people were negotiating with each other old school without the use of AI. So we compared the outcome of that negotiation with another negotiation where one side was using AI, the counterpart wasn't using AI. And then we compared it to the third experiment where we had both sides using AI. And we ran the same simulation all over the place, and we repeated this over and over and over again. And what was completely surprising to me, Tim, I never saw this coming, but in the negotiation where both sides were using AI, trust, transparency, and honesty went through the roof. The parties were more honest, more transparent than in the old school negotiation with no use of AI. So the negotiation was not only more efficient, they were better prepared. They quantified more value when both sides were using AI. And as you just pointed out, the most surprising thing was they were way more honest and way more transparent. So I've changed my mind, Tim. I actually believe that AI will help us to become better human beings and better negotiators. And your next question might be, but why is that? And honestly, I don't know, because the experiment couldn't tell us. I expect that I'm just guessing right now, but I guess that AI helped the negotiators to be better prepared. They understood the numbers. They understood what they were doing. They understood the framework. And I think we can all agree that when human beings feel better prepared, they're also more confident. And when you're more confident, you might want to be more transparent. You might want to be more honest. You might want to be more sharing. Because when you are not that confident or a little bit confused about the content, you are a little bit hesitant. And I often say, what is the safe word in negotiation? What is that unskilled, uneducated negotiator say the most? They say no, because it's safe, right? No, Tim, I don't want to do it. So I can see the big difference between the skilled, experienced, knowledgeable negotiator compared to the other one. They don't say no all the time because they see the opportunity. So again, I'm guessing, but I'm just guessing that AI made them more confident, more secure, and thereby they became more transparent.
That's super interesting. Like that part really, really interests me, especially the piece around transparency. That was going to be my question. Like, why would someone feel more comfortable being transparent? Because obviously, like they start to think about being vulnerable or loss of control or fear of being taken advantage of. But then what you're saying is the AI gives you a roadmap, or for some reason, the AI gives you like this other person in the room. It's like having a super genius in the room, and you get this hybrid
Mm,
intelligence that you can kind of go back and forth with, and that somehow leads to more confidence, which leads to more transparency, which leads to more trust. I think it's Deloitte, isn't it, that says there's four components of trust, like humanity,
mm, mm.
transparency, I think is one of them, and then
Right, right.
reliability and capability.
Mm,
But
mm.
that makes a lot of sense to me. In terms of that, then AI, are there any downsides to using AI? Like what could people do wrong, or how could it be used to manipulate?
Oh, like any tools, it can be abused. I think one of the things we have to be careful about using AI is not really practicing and training our own brain. Just leave it up to AI. I think the human touch, one of the questions I get the most, probably, especially from procurement, I would say, and legal professionals, is that will we be replaced by AI? And my honest answer is I have no idea. Don't know, can't tell you. One thing I can tell you, though, that is negotiators using AI will replace negotiators not using AI. That's a fact. And I can promise that. Well, what is the downside? I think the downside is that we may lose some creativity ourselves because we just get very dependent on AI. I mean, to be honest, Tim, I use AI a lot every day. Previously I do a lot of research. I was reading a lot of research papers. I don't do that anymore. I had AI reading it for me. Is there a risk I might be losing some details? Absolutely, because AI is doing a summary of this 50-page research paper, right? And just giving me the highlights, and I'm happy. I might be missing some important parts that AI didn't pick up that I, as a human being, might have thought that this is interesting. So there might be smaller details. There might be some emotional stuff that, as a human being, you might have an interest in that AI don't pick up on. So I also saw a study recently that was a bit scary. I think it was last week, coming out saying that some organization, I apologize, I forgot who, had done a study, and they actually identified that people using AI a lot, intelligence level went down a little bit because they got so dependent on AI, so they actually stopped using their own brain. So I think if we should look at very AI at very holistic level, we have to continue using our own brain and just outsource it to AI. I think that might be a downside in the whole thing.
That's really interesting. Just a quick one to tell you about something I'm very excited about. It's the launch of my next book, The First Domino: How to Land Your First Client in 90 Days or Less. This is the book that organizations are taking their whole entire sales force through. It's all about business development. It's about growing you as an individual. It's the psychology of sales, and it's how to land your first flagship client that can change everything. Once you land that client, it doesn't matter if it's a new product that you're launching or you're a founder and entrepreneur and you need to get that big, credible client in to not only get the cash flow, but to get the reputation, to get the testimonials, to get the significance that means. This book is a playbook that you can read on the weekend and implement on Monday. It's an absolute game-changing strategy. This is all implementable advice. There's domino challenges in there at the end of each chapter so that you come away from the book not just knowing how to do it, but you'll have already done it. Let's start a chain reaction of your success. Grab a copy of The First Domino today and put it into action. Let's go. It only takes one. So Dr. Kell, I'd like to do something a little bit different here. I'd like to do, if we could, maybe a dispelling myths. I'm just going to think of some randomly, but if we could dispel some myths just quickly, that would be really interesting, I think, to just get listeners off to the right start with negotiation, because there's something, you are a prolific author. Like the 27 books must be some sort of record in the field of negotiation. I think you've sold more than 3 million copies, which is, my hats are off to you, because that's amazing work. But if you wouldn't mind, like, is there such a thing as win-win negotiation, or what's your thoughts on win-win? Because I see this a lot being thrown around.
I personally, I don't like the term win-win. Not that there's anything wrong with the original concept of it, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what win-win might be. And when I say I'm not too fond of the term, is because I meet a lot of organizations that are saying, "Oh, we aim to win-win," and then when you look into the details, what they're really into is win-win for themselves and don't really care about the counterpart. And then for them, that's win-win.
Yeah.
And obviously, that was not the original idea about win-win. Um, to me, I am a collaborative negotiator. I believe in collaboration, not just because it sounds nice, but because it's generate more value. If we take this to a higher level, and look all the way back to The Wealth of Nation, written by Adam Smith, back to 1776. Now we're getting into a history lesson here. But if you look into that book, it's still considered really important today because it's considered the Bible of the capitalistic system. So the Scottish philosopher Adam Smith in 1776 was walking around in the Scottish Highland thinking about how should nations trade with each other, how should businesses do business with each other, right? And he wrote The Wealth of Nations, the first book really in the world on how should anybody do business. And there are two problems with that book today. One, it is, to be honest, quite boring. I don't know if you ever tried to read it, Tim, but it's heavy. It's there's no graphics in it. There's no nothing. It's heavy reading. And the second part that is
I'll
even
read it to my kids
yeah,
then. That'll be perfect for tonight.
it's a perfect thing to make them go to sleep. That's for sure. And the second part about the book that is even worse than the first part I said is that it's actually wrong in most of its conclusions. And thank God I'm not the first one saying that. The famous Dr. Nash, who was so famous that Hollywood decided to produce a movie about him called Beautiful Mind, where Russell Crowe played the role of Dr. Nash. He was actually out already in his 60s saying that, this book is wrong in its conclusion. Because what Adam Smith said in his book is that we should all do what is best for ourselves. That is the capitalistic system, purely preaching egocentric behavior. But Dr. Nash, who got the Nobel Prize in economics and was an absolute genius, he was a genius at a level where you're a little bit crazy as well, right? But he was a genius. He's the father of game theory as well. That is very important to study if you're into negotiation as well. So anyway, Nash came out already in the 60s and said, Adam Smith is wrong because the best result will come when you're doing what is best for yourself and the group at the same time. That's the only way we all win. And that's basically the foundation of what we created in economics. Because again, collaboration to me is not just about being nice, because I'm into it because it makes mathematical sense. And I think you said before we started our podcast today that you are into the data side. And I am, because numbers tell the truth, right? Back to the concept of terms of payment. Instead of us sitting and haggling about terms of payment, just exchange cost of capital. And if we figure out that your cost of capital is 6% and mine is 3%, I should finance the deal. It makes sense. Every computer in the world will tell you that is the right way to go. But if we don't exchange the data, we're just sitting here looking for a black cat in a dark room. We have no freaking, I apologize my language, no freaking idea on what we're doing. So back to Dr. Nash, Adam Smith was wrong. We have to collaborate to make financial sense. And you will get wealthier by doing that, and I'll get wealthier by doing that.
Yeah, I love that. And the piece there is that if you didn't be transparent, if you didn't have the trust to then get to the transparency, to be able to find out that information and then share that detail, getting the loan or getting the cost of capital elsewhere, that money, whatever was there, say it was $500,000 in difference, that's the value that's been missed. That's the bit you're creating by actually doing that exchange of information, and you're missing that longer term relationship. I think you pointed it out in your earlier question: who's going to be more loyal once you've gone down that road? So that's really, really great. So building on this, and I do love that you called out that yes, there's collaborative, but there's also positional negotiation. It just depends what type of negotiation you're into or doing, and it's not saying one or other is better. It's just saying there's different types of negotiation for different circumstances. Do you believe that we should push for no first? Like I know how Chris Voss talks about it and the fact that getting someone to say no makes them feel safe, or do you think we should be pushing for possibility mindedness and more opening up that conversation? How should we go forward to reveal should we be the first one to reveal the details to then get reciprocity? Like how should we do it?
I think I have a very different approach to negotiation compared to Chris Voss. I got the deepest respect for hostage negotiators. I think they're doing a wonderful job. I couldn't do it. I mean, if you called me, Tim, and said there's a hostage thing going on down the street, could you come and help? I would tell you immediately, I have no idea how to do that. Call somebody else. And the same thing goes, if I should be rude for a moment, if you bring a hostage negotiator into a commercial negotiation, they have no clue what they're doing. Now I'm being rude, but that's a fact. Because again, back to what I said, why do commercial negotiations happen? To create and distribute value. A hostage negotiator has no idea about value. And to me, a negotiation is not a game. It's not about, mirroring the counterpart or reading the counterpart or figuring out what are they saying or having a bunch of smart tools and techniques in your toolbox. It's about figuring out the math. And I hate to say it, but commercial negotiation is about mathematics. So if you hate numbers, you should probably not be in commercial negotiation, or you should have a really skilled controller on your team. So all the game playing, I really dislike it. To me, the more transparent we are, the more we just go straight to the point, figuring out where the value is, the wealthier we're getting. So the whole toolbook about, how do we discover this and how do we show strategic empathy or whatever we're doing, to me, it's honestly a waste of time. It's sitting down with the counterpart, discussing how we want to negotiate. And yes, if we have a counterpart that don't want to create value, then it's true. Then we have to use a lot of these gambits in order to conduct that negotiation if we would continue to doing it in a zero sum. But the second we move into collaborative negotiation, what we call Smartnership, then it's a completely different toolbox where I don't believe in all those things. One of the things, Tim, that I encourage my clients to do is putting trust on the agenda. So simply discussing trust is not a taboo. It's not. It's a thing we have to focus on. So I often say to the counterpart when I'm assisting a client in a negotiation, I want to address trust. Not that we don't have trust in you right now, but we want to be allowed to verbalize if we feel trust is dropping in this negotiation, and you should be allowed to do the same. Because back to what I said, is trust is low, transaction cost goes up, and profit go down. So we have to start off by creating trust, and it's not easy because I think you would agree with me, Tim. It's not like I walk into a room, shake your hand, and say, "Tim, could we trust each other?" And you go, "You got it." That's not the way it happens. It's coming through actions, right? Not through wording. But back to what I said, trust is creating value. So the more transparent we are, the less we're playing all those funny games, even though it sounds funny and it's a great game and a social event, the more money we're going to make.
I love it. So what is Smartership AI framework? Like if we unpack that.
Smartership is really just partnership version 2.0. I'm sure everybody knows the term of partnership, which is a collaborative method. But some years ago, we discovered that partnership for some organizations is really just long-term zero sum. And what I mean by that is that, you meet organizations and saying, "Oh, we are in partnership with our clients and our suppliers." And when you dig into the details, they're really just repeating zero sum over and over again, but they've been doing it for 8 years and then they call it partnership. So the big difference between partnership and Smartnership is that in a Smartnership, you have discussed the role of engagement. So you've discussed how to negotiate, as I just mentioned. You have expanded and developed the number of variables, and you know the cost and the benefit of your variables. Third, you have established trust and you understand the value of trust, as I just mentioned. And last but not least, you also have defined a strategy. So you have actually established how you want to negotiate with that specific counterpart you're going to negotiate with. Smartnership is necessary to create economics. So you have to build up that system in order to utilize that value generation. And again, we integrated AI into the whole thing in 2019, 2020, when we did the first exercises and study on utilizing AI. And I just fell in love with AI immediately because AI can help us support and save time by generating all this value. Because you know what, I don't know, a lot of people are saying AI don't have bias, so that's a benefit. AI actually do have biases, which could be good or bad. But one of the things we have discovered is that AI in general have bias towards more collaborative negotiations, most of them. So that means if you try and force a very positional negotiation onto an AI system, it will actually try and push back and say, "Tim, why don't you try a little bit more collaborative approach?" So there are biases in the AI system that would try and make people more collaborative. So I actually think that AI in general, this sounds weird, can make us better human beings because it's actually trying to do better. It's actually trying to avoid having biases besides the one I mentioned right here. So it's kind of more objective than a lot of people are doing. I think another individuals that a lot of people that are into negotiation should study is the late Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman's called the father of behavioral economics. And I'm sure if our viewers today haven't read his book, I would certainly encourage them to do that because he won the Nobel Prize in economics as well. He actually came out early on and saying all people are deeply rational. We make decision on emotions, and then we find the fact later on that proves that our emotional decision was absolutely right. And Kahneman was right about that. We are very emotional, even if we know it or not. And AI can actually help us become less emotional, more rational, and focus on the things that actually create value again.
That's amazing. That's a penny drop moment right there. So we find the emotion and then we go find the information to validate the emotion we felt, so that then we can feel great. Like that's just penny drop moment right there. Wow, that was pure gold. Thank you, Keld Jensen. Like that was amazing. You've just given us a masterclass in how to basically negotiate smarter. And I think with transparency being the key there and trust building to generate real strategic leverage. So my heartfelt wish is for everyone to go out and get a copy of the SMART Negotiator. It is a blueprint for deal making with an ethical undertone there, and it's the future of deal making. So yeah, thank you once again for coming on. Where should people go, one, to find you? And can we just unpack a little bit more around what the work is that you do? Because it's more than just the books.
Yes, we are a global organization. I have partners most places in the world, and we assist and help clients develop negotiation strategy. We ran workshops, training them in negotiation, and we actively participate in negotiations on behalf or with our clients as well to support them in negotiations. I do a bunch of keynotes around the world. I am a professor at a few universities, both in the US and in Europe, where I do masterclasses in negotiations as well. And then obviously, as you mentioned, Tim, I'm an author, published a number of books around the world as well.
Yeah, beautiful. I think if anyone got value from today, share it with someone who needs to negotiate daily, because it is a better world when everyone negotiates better.